Hi guys, this is Miss Cortez, and I'm going to talk to you guys about asexual versus sexual reproduction. So let's start it off by thinking back. What is one fact you already know about asexual and sexual reproduction? Remember that we've been covering mitosis and meiosis. With mitosis, that is how our body cells are able to reproduce an identical copy. This helps us with growth and with healing, and is very important when you are your little zygote to go into an embryo and have like multiple levels of function. That's super important, our mitosis. So that's what we use to replace our body cells. Things that reproduce asexually, we've talked about a little bit when we talked about prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Remember, our prokaryotic cells, they mainly reproduced by asexual reproduction. And with this, they went through a process called binary fission, which we'll talk about a little more today. We're also talked about our eukaryotic cells, which are mainly multicellular organisms. Some of them are single cellular. We'll talk about that. Most of our eukaryotes reproduce sexually, but some of them reproduce asexually. We'll get a little more into that. And then for them to be able to reproduce sexually, they have to make gametes, sperm and egg, which is done in the process meiosis, which we just talked about. So we'll get a little more into all of this today. So what you want to take away from this is that you can compare and contrast asexual and sexual reproduction with regard to genetic information and variation in offspring. So with our asexual reproduction, this requires only one parent. Offspring have 100% of the same chromosomes as the parent. So they are a little clone, okay? In other words, the offsprings are exact clones of the parent. These are mostly unicellular organisms, reproduce this way, and then we maintain a lot of our body through mitosis. So, asexual reproduction, mitosis. So, this is the process where animal cells divide. This is a type of asexual reproduction. Our body cells, somatic cells, go through the process of mitosis. It's not truly asexual in the sense that we're not making an independent living organism, but it is asexual in the process that we are making another living cell for ourselves. So this results in an exact copy of the parent cell. So examples of organisms that reproduce asexually are going to be our hydra, our sea star, strawberries, archaebacteria, eubacteria, euglena, paramecium, and yeast. Okay, so with our asexual reproduction, our first type we're going to talk about is binary fission. So this is where every organelle is copied and the organism divides in two. So this is going to be mainly what our prokaryotes do, if you remember when we talked about prokaryotes. And this process is very similar to mitosis. Just remember that in binary fission, there is no nucleus. So it's exactly like mitosis if mitosis didn't have a nucleus involved. Asexual reproduction, also known as budding. Okay, so budding is an outgrowth of a parent and it splits off and lives independently. So an example of this would be hydra. So I'll post this slideshow, and if you click on the movie link, you can see it happen in real time, which is really interesting. But yeah, basically, if you look at the picture down here, this is a hydra. These are often found in the ocean. They can bud a little version of themselves, and they just bud off a little clone. Another type of asexual reproduction is spores. So spores are airborne cells that are released from the parent. So a lot of organisms that do this are fungi, algae, and protozoa. So all of these are actually like multicellular eukaryote organisms, but they still reproduce asexually. Okay? So as you can see in the gift, when they put heat on the mushroom, it shoots off its spores. The spores are carried on the wind and create more mushrooms somewhere else. Okay, so asexual reproduction, there's also regeneration. So this is when a body part has broken off and the organism grows a new one. So once again, there are multicellular organisms who are doing this. So examples of this are starfish and lizards. So basically, you can cut a tentacle off of a starfish and it can regenerate and grow a new limb. The same exact thing can happen with our lizards. So this organism can grow a whole new limb. So it's very exciting. Okay. Another form of asexual reproduction is fragmentation, and this is very close to regeneration. So this is when a single parent breaks into parts that regenerate to form whole new individuals. So examples of this would be like worms and starfish. So potentially when you cut that leg off of a starfish, if it's separated, it can eventually grow a whole new starfish. Worms, this is often seen with. So this little guy here is a flatworm and it has really silly little eyes on top. But if you cut it into 3 pieces, you will get 3 worms. This is the same if you find earthworms on the sidewalk. If you split them in half, they can keep on living and it will become 2 separate worms. Sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction is different from asexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction requires 2 parents that each share half the genetic information. So the offspring share the characteristics of each parent. So meiosis is not sexual reproduction itself, but is the process that produces the sex gametes. So it produces the sperm or the egg. So meiosis is not actually sex, it is just the process in which you produce sperm and eggs. And if you remember with our cells at the end of meiosis, they are 4 different cells that contain half the genetic information. So if you need 46 chromosomes to make up an individual, half would be 23. Oh my goodness, Joaquin. Half would be 23. And so these 2 gametes can join together to form a whole individual. So these are some examples of organisms that reproduce sexually. So plants, fish, mammals, amphibians, birds, reptiles, insects, crustaceans, these all reproduce sexually. Okay? So with sexual reproduction in animals, it can happen 2 ways. So internally inside, so the egg is fertilized by the sperm inside the female. So this is mainly mammals, birds, reptiles, insects, spiders. Externally is the egg is fertilized by the sperm outside of the female. So the female will lay the eggs and then the male will come along and fertilize them. This happens a lot in fish and some amphibians, and this is how plants actually sexually reproduce. So pollen is just like plant sperm basically. So when you get pollen up your nose, you basically have plant sperm up your nose. And there are male and female flowers. So bees go around, they get covered in the pollen. So they spread the sperm from the male flowers to the female flowers. And it's able to reproduce, which forms our seeds and our fruit on plants. Okay, so as you can see with our sexual reproduction of plants, flowers are the reproductive organs of the plant. So basically, a bouquet is a big pile of reproductive organs. Some flowers have both male and female parts on the same flower, and some flowers are strictly male and strictly female. So the stigma with the anther on it is the male part, and then the stamen is the male part with the anther on it, and the stigma and the style are basically where the ovary is. So sorry, I'm having a baby. He says he's hungry, but he doesn't want to take his bottle. Okay, so the advantages and disadvantages. So there are clear advantages and disadvantages to asexual reproduction. So the advantages are you can produce more offspring. You don't need a partner to be able to reproduce. So if you're all alone on your lonesome, you can go ahead and reproduce. Also, too, since we've talked about it with asexual reproduction, most of these organisms are more simpler in structure or they're unicellular organisms. So it takes very little time for them to reproduce. They don't go through like a whole pregnancy. Only one parent is involved, so no searching for mates. Makes it way more simple. Requires less energy, and offsprings do usually do not require care with asexual reproduction. However, there are disadvantages. So some DNA being passed down, same DNA being passed down from generation to generation to generation. So there's no genetic variation in the offspring. This means if the environment were to happen to change over time, it would have a harder time adapting to changes in the environment since there is no genetic variation. Also, too, if a parent has a genetic disease or detrimental genes or a mutation happens that's detrimental, offspring will have it too. So, advantages versus disadvantages of sexual reproduction. The advantages is that there's genetic variation in the offspring. Also, for adaptation/evolution to happen in species over time. Organisms are more protected because of genetic variation. So disadvantageous traits may not be passed on. So even if, like, you say, for example, one of your parents has a heart murmur, it's not a guarantee that you will have a heart murmur. Or if one of your parents has diabetes or a specific type of cancer that's passed down genetically, there's not a guarantee that you will have it. Disadvantages. It requires two organisms, so you must find a mate and be able to attract a mate. It also requires more cellular energy, so yeah, it takes a lot more resources, more time required for offspring to develop. So like you go through pregnancy with sexual reproduction. Pregnancy can take a while depending on the organism. So like rabbits, it only takes like a few weeks. So most prey animals, it takes a short time. The more advanced animals and carnivorous animals, it takes a little longer. So with humans, it says it takes 9 months. In reality, it's 40 weeks, which is closer to 10 months than it is 9 months, just to let you know. But you usually have your baby right when you hit the 10-month mark. And then like elephants, they're like pregnant for like 22 months, which is close to like 2 years, which is insane. But yeah, that is all that I have for you guys. Make sure that if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, that you email me or you get on the Google Meet link that I provided and ask me any questions that you have between 2 and 3. Have a wonderful day. Make sure that you get your little Google Forms done with your entry and exit ticket.